Welcome to the third part of our look at the combat tracker for Fantasy Grounds. This time we're going to concentrate on the options which are available for the combat tracker. There's quite a few of these, so let's get on with it. Let's open up our options menu. We scroll down to the combat GM where most of them are situated. The first one we see is Add Auto NPC Initiative. The default here is for it to be off. What this means is that if we've got an encounter with some kobolds on it and we place this encounter onto the combat tracker, you can see here in the initiative column it's blank. The no initiative is automatically rolled. If we change that to on, then if we place the same encounter again, we see that this time the NPCs have actually had initiative rolled, and there's various initiatives sent in there. Let's get rid of that, and then if we put it to group, which is the third option, if we add the encounter now, then the NPCs are placed in a group and all with the same initiative. The second option here is Add NPC Numbering. We see that this is set to off at the moment, and we can see that when we placed the kobolds onto the combat tracker from that encounter, none of them had a number. If we switch this to append, then when we add this encounter again, we see that the NPCs have been given a number. Now we've got 10 of them on the combat tracker now, so they're numbered 1 to 10. If we get rid of this and then change this to random, when we add this encounter now, we see that a random number is allocated to the kobolds. So this is useful if, for example, not all the kobolds are immediately visible to the player characters. Maybe some of them are hiding around a corner or something like that. Then if you've got them numbered 1 to 5, then the players will know that there are 5 of them. If you've got them randomly numbered, then they won't have a clue how many kobolds they're actually facing. The next one is NPC roles, fixed or variable. You've only got fixed or you've got variable. If we have a look at an NPC sheet and we'll look at their damage here, you can see that the kobold here does 4 and then in brackets 1d4 plus 2 piercing damage. So if we've got this NPC roles here set to variable, if this particular kobold did some damage, for example with its sling to shadow, then you can see that a 1d4 is rolled, a 2 is added, and we get to 3. If we change this now to fixed and make the same attack against the same character, we see that they do a straight 4 points of damage. So if you want the fixed amount of damage to be rolled, then set it to fixed, otherwise a dice is rolled and any modifiers added in. Next we've got the player ring bell on turn, which just simply rings a bell when it comes back to the player's turn. The next one, player show turn order. Now this is one where you've got 3 options. You've got it on, friendly, or you've got it off. So the default is on, and if we make these PCs or NPCs visible, and if we roll the initiative for the PCs as well, and then we have a look at the player character screen, we can see that the order is shown here. We've got Generic rolled high, so he's first, 21, and then we've got all the kobolds, and then we've got the rest of the PCs showing on the combat tracker in their correct turn order. If we switch this now to friendly, and we look at the player character screen, we see that the order is shown for the player characters, but the player characters don't see the initiative column or the order column for the NPCs, so they don't know which order the combat is going to go. The DM of course can see the order, and he knows that after Deneric's gone, then Kobold 12's going to go, but the PCs don't know that. And if we then change it to show turn order off, then when we look at the player character screen, the no information is shown at all on the turn order. So essentially what this option does is it removes the initiative or turn order as shown on the player's combat tracker, so they don't know whose turn is going to be next, whether it's one of them or whether or not it's one of the PCs or not. The next option here is turn show effects, and we've got off or on, and essentially what that means is that when it's the player character's turn, if they've got an effect on them, or if an NPC had an effect on them, if this option is turned off, then no chat message is shown in chat. So for example, Deneric here, it's his turn. We can see that there is an effect on Deneric, but in the chat panel here it hasn't shown his effect. But if we change that now to on, and we cycle back through the NPCs and come back to Deneric and have a look at the screen here, we can see that the effect that was on Deneric has been shown in the chat window, as has the effect that was shown on the shadow. Now, this is not necessarily going to be that important to show the player character's effects, but if any of these kobolds had had an effect on them, then that wouldn't show up, and that would make it harder for the PCs to maybe know that there is an effect on them which is beneficial to the particular NPC, may have a resistance or something like that. One thing to note about this option is that if NPCs have got resistances or things like that which are innate, then these are never shown to the player characters. So for example, if we were to, let's just get rid of this guy here, if we were to put this air elemental onto the combat tracker and make it visible, you can see that it's got all sorts of resistances and it's got immunities, etc, etc. If we look at the player character screen, the player's combat tracker, we can't see any of those effects that are actually on the air elemental. And it would actually, it won't show up here either. When the air elemental comes round, it won't show the effects. So this option only shows effects which have been placed on a character or placed on an NPC that are visible. In the next option, let's just get rid of the air elemental and let's get our kobolds back on. I don't want a single kobold, I want all of them. If we look at the next one, it says turn skip hidden actor. Now again, this is a useful thing. If, for example, the PCs are facing half a dozen kobolds like that, but some of them are hiding around a corner, if you have this set to on, then any NPCs which are invisible get missed in the combat tracker. So we can look at the player's combat tracker here, and it shows that Kobold 3 and Kobold 4 are visible, but we know that actually Kobold 10 came before Kobold 3, but there was no, although it shows here in the DM screen that Kobold 10 had a turn, it doesn't show that information on the player screen at all. It just goes straight from Iona to Kobold 3, so the players have no idea that there is a Kobold 10 sitting around somewhere. So that's what skip hidden actors is. If you've got that off, then the invisible actors aren't skipped. And so the players would get to know that there is another kobold somewhere, because a turn has happened and no visible thing is on the combat tracker. Stop at round start just basically is either on or off. It means that if it's on, then at the end of the round there will be a pause and the Dungeon Master will need to click to make the next turn happen. If it's off, then it'll just go straight from the last actor on the combat tracker to the first. View bar colours cycles through standard, tiered, and back to standard again, and these are just the colours which appear on the NPCs or the player's on the map and indicates a level of health. The standard is just I can't remember exactly what the divisions are, but it just gives you more information if it's tiered than if it's standard. The next three are all to do with health for allies, non-allies, and wound categories. Now, the default for the view ally health is the status, and if we look at the character sheet, then we can see that Daenerys is healthy, Iwan is healthy, and Shadow is wounded. And for the NPCs, we can actually see that the kobolds have got 5 hit points and no wounds, so that's quite a lot of information. If we change the view ally health to off, we can see now that that information that we had, little as it was, is completely missing from the player characters. They can't tell. They can tell from what their own wounds are, obviously, because they can see their own character sheets, but they can't tell what the other player characters' wounds, temporary hit points, or whatever are. We can set that to detailed, and if we look at the player screen now, we can see that all the information is available to all the players. All the players' hit points, temporary hit points, and wounds are noted on the combat tracker, and this is the default state. If we have a look now at the view ally health, non-ally, sorry, then it's pretty much the same thing. At the moment we've got it set to detailed, which is why the players are able to see that the kobolds have got 5 hit points and no wounds. But if we set that to status, then what we saw with the original screen for the player characters is what we are seeing now. The kobolds are healthy, and if we were to give one of the kobolds, if we were to give this kobold here some wounds, kobold 3, if we were to give him some wounds, and we looked at the screen now, it shows that that kobold has got heavy damage. So this is graded really. They have a status which goes through from healthy to wounded to heavy, and we can turn that off altogether, and so therefore the players don't see any information at all about how many hit points or whether or not even the creature has been wounded or whatever. So that's completely off, and the players have got no information at all on the status of any of the non-player characters. And we can finally turn it on to detailed. I know that's we've shown detailed. Sorry. So you've got status, you've got off, and you've got detailed, and depending on which one you prefer. And this final one is wound categories, and so it's set to simple. And as we saw there, we've got healthy and we've got heavy. If we give Kobold 4 1 hit point or 1 damage, we'll see that it's wounded. And if we give it some more damage, let's give it 3 points of damage, it's heavy, he doesn't have enough hit points. Let's give this kobold 10 hit points to start with, and give it 5 points of damage, I think, 4. Okay, well that's... The categories that you've got here is wounded and heavy damage, but if you set it to detailed, finally managed to figure it out. If you set this to detailed, if we have a look at Kobold 4 now, Kobold 4 has got light damage, so it just gives you a bit more information rather than just wounded. It says it's lightly wounded, and if you keep on giving it a bit more damage, say give it 3 points of damage, then it now shows moderate, and you can see that Kobold 3 has got critical damage because it's got 4 wounds out of 5 hit points. So the wound categories just are a gradation of what the wounds are, and it gives the players a little bit more information, but not as much information as the view ally health detailed would do. So if you have that as status and then detailed, then it will give you this information here. The players will see this information here. Now there's a couple of other options which are house rules basically, but there is the attack, fumbles and critical tables. This can be off and on. You need to enable the tables, and on a score of a 20 or a 1, then there'll be an automatic roll on the table. You can have that set to just fumble only or critical only, or you can have it off. There's auto death rolls, which means that if it's set to on, then the players, if they are unconscious or dying, then they will automatically make death saving throws, or you can switch that off, and in which case the players make their own death saving throws. And then there is this other option here, which rolls initiative at the end of each round, which is defaulting to off, but you can set that to on, and at the end of each round then initiative is re-rolled. Some people like to have that option available to them so that it makes combat more complicated. And the final one here is they've got the massive damage, the system shock, which is off by default but can be switched on. And this follows the normal sort of rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide, I believe it is, for system shock. If you take a certain amount of damage, a certain percentage of damage, then you have got to roll on a system shock table, and various horrible things might happen to you if you fail the saving throw. So that is automated if you have that switched on. And remember, if you've got this switched on, it's switched on for player characters as well as for the NPCs. Okay, I think that about wraps up the options for the combat tracker, and we'll see you in the final video where we'll actually look at combat. Cheers for now.